Welcome to the Ascension Stargate podcast series, where we discuss the aspects of human consciousness, spirituality, metaphysics and philosophy, energy, extraterrestrial life, science, biology, and the alchemy of higher states of beingness, all from a heart-centered perspective. I am your host and guide, Glenn Mate, and let's begin our journey.
All right, well, welcome everybody to another fantastic episode of the Ascension Stargate podcast series. And I'm here with what I call a champion. He's a champion so many different ways. He's near and dear to my heart. This is his second time on our podcast, and we've been kind of going back and forth and working throughout the years as, you know, I being a student of this wonderful person. Let's talk about Kimo Kepano. He is a Kanaka Maoli High Seer with over 30 years of experience. As a healer, he's worked with over 10,000 cases and has developed the Light Seer pedagogy. He's teaching his students to heal beyond the biofield. Kimo focuses on energy consciousness, bridging science with spiritual growth, and he's been featured on so many different platforms. He's been on the Travel Channel, he's been on Apple TV's Chief of War, and Gaia's Beyond Belief. He aims to channel the highest alignment of your authentic future. Kimo, it is an honor to have you again as a guest speaker, and thank you for sharing and co-creating with me today. I appreciate you so very much.
I thank you for that introduction, Glenn. It sounds so fancy when you read it, when you say it all like that, but really, in the end, what I hope that people understand is that what I'm able to do, I truly believe everyone is able to do. We just have our own way of doing it. You know, the amount of times, Glenn, people tell me, you know, I just wish that I could see what you see. And I say, well, you know, you see how you see. And the way that you see is so specific that you wouldn't even guess that it's energy work. But technically, we all see it. We all access it differently. It just so happens that for me, it's just profoundly visual. But most people, it's not visual, it's internal. But I also want to say something that you had said before. You talked about yourself being a student on this path. And I actually believe that I'm a student as well. We just so happen to be walking at the same path at the same time, and sometimes we change our directions, we move from different locations. And I actually think that it is profoundly helpful to always view ourselves as students. I do push against the people who call themselves masters, you know, Reiki master, master of this or master of that. I think that if mastery is in equilibrium to hours spent, then that's one thing. But I don't think that mastery of craft is actually a very healthy paradigm. I think that it's actually shows that you don't have anything else to learn, and I don't want to ever stop learning. So I myself call myself a student to the work. I always want to be a student. There is no summit to my knowledge. I will always be learning. And in fact, it's been about a year since we talked last time, and I'm not sure what comes up today, but I guarantee you it'll be more than it was last time.
I agree with you so much on that. You know, it's always about learning, and, you know, life has its way of showing us when we think that we've studied and learned everything about there is about one particular subject, something comes up to show us that that's completely different.
Absolutely.
How did that happen? Why
Absolutely.
did that happen? And it gives us that opportunity to continue to learn more, not only about a subject, but about ourselves and how we view it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we get very stuck in a binary field, or even as spiritualists, when we're saying, well, let me just take a look at this problem in this person's body if we're talking about healing, for example. When
Right.
we talk about healing and we're looking at a problem in someone's body, if you're only looking at it at the direct field, you're only going to get a simple two-dimensional read. But what would happen if we looked at someone who needed a healing and looked at it from underneath, looked at it from above, looked at it from behind? Then all of a sudden you perceive the emotion, the circumstances, the environment, and so much more than just the two-dimensional read. But that's what? It's being able to look at it from another direction, not just one.
Absolutely. And speaking of other directions, we today are going to go into a deep dive into something that some people might call controversial, but let's take a
Mm,
look at it from the point of the student, and it's another opportunity to look at information in a different way or to
hmm
expand on our knowledge base on what we already perceive. We're going to go a couple steps further, and we're
Good.
going to talk about misalignments and controversial spiritual themes.
hmm
And there is a lot of that today because it's tough for people to really discern on what is the truth, what is their truth, and how the information is being perceived, and everything that fits in that linear format in between. There's so much to talk about, and there's people selling spirituality. Not
hmm
to say that we can't help others by providing information that is useful for their personal growth, but some are misleading by saying, you're this, and I'm reading you because you're that. And I'm perceiving that from the higher wisdom that I get, or the connections are telling me that you're this particular star seed, or you're this
hmm
particular, and there's lots of falsehoods within that.
hmm
And people accept these words as if they were gospel or the end all to be all of truth, and then
hmm
move forward in their life without actually investigating what that person said, why they said that, and is that actually related? So let's dive in and talk
Yeah.
about all of the fraudulent spiritual appropriation and plastic shamanism that is taking place today.
What I think that when it comes to the way that we listen to someone's platform and adopt some of their beliefs, I really believe, I'm going to say something from the very beginning that's going to shake a lot of people up. They're not going to like it. But I think about 85 to 95% of people who are on a platform on television, speaking about spirituality and spirit and energy work, should actually not be in practice. Because there is a major difference between talent and development. There's a huge difference. And if we were to just say that with me not developing my abilities, even though I showed a high aptitude to my talent at a very, very young age, I wasn't developing my abilities. I could tell you what I saw. I might be right, but also it comes with a major, if I'm just focusing on talent, it comes with a major lack of dimension because we can't be reliant on just that. I got to be able to see what happens when I'm wrong. I have to be able to see what happens when I say something and I misread. And I have to learn from that. I have to have someone who knows more than I do challenge what I can do. So that way I get balance. That's just the way that the brain works. And so many of these talented individuals are going onto platforms and using language that is actually not developmental language. What does that mean? Spirits are stuck. Now, there's a major medium on television who uses the language like this. Well, that soul is now stuck. That soul hasn't moved
Mm.
on yet. You know, when I look at that, I say, well, you have such high talent to what you're able to do. But you are now speaking in front of millions of people, and now millions of people are believing what you said because you were reliant on your talent. You brought in information that was real, and now all of a sudden you're bringing in your bias. You know, and that specific person who says that is biased by religion. So religion is non-neutral. Energy must be neutral at all times. And if you do not know how to speak with neutrality, then there's no development.
Mm.
It Development is learning how to transmute, learning how to transmute all of our bias and dogma and neutralize it. So that way we can speak in a way where the client or the patron or the person who's coming to us is actually amplified by their own fields. Which means, and I know that you study the brain, I'm a firm believer that everyone who is in practice energy work must study the brain because so much of what we say is actually just based on your subconscious mind. It's based on your projections. Saying, well, I hear this one a lot, Glenn. I have gotten the download from my guides that now I am the one who's supposed to lead people to do this. And I want to say, read it, girl. Really? Like it's you? You're the one? And what we don't realize is that when we get a download that is still going through our bias, it's feeding our ego. So then you say, I am a star seed, and I'm supposed to be the one to do this without realizing that that itself is based in ego. And we
Hmm.
want ego. We want healthy ego through all of this, but not to push it in a way that says, I am the provider first, which is why, even though I know that I can provide phenomenal insight, it goes back to what I said earlier. I'm still learning. I don't ever want someone to call me a master. I don't ever want to be that person. I don't ever want to call myself that person who is the master. I don't think it's ethically correct. So now to go back to the original question, with all these individuals who are speaking in ways that is absolute, when you have a high platform, you have a high responsibility, which means that people are going to believe you no matter what you say. And if you say something that is based in your bias, they're going to think about it as absolute. But their absolute is based on your bias. So how's that for an opening?
I just love it because, um, you know, so many people are labeling themselves that I am this, I am a shaman, I am a starseed, and it pigeonholes you into expansion, right? Because now you're putting yourself in a box that has this defined label on it, and as a human being, you're so much more.
Well,
You're unlimited.
yeah, let's amplify that a little bit because I totally get why we say I am a shaman and I am a starseer. Let's just break it down a little bit.
Right.
If we take shamanism back to its original aboriginal form, which is to be an intermediary between the divine and you, right? When you look at it from that perspective, I actually love the word shaman. When you look at it as an intermediary, my problem is that the word shaman has now gone through cultural divide,
Hmm.
where you have these individuals who do not align with a very specific culture, who learn shamanism from that culture and then appropriate the culture, not appreciate it. Growing up in the Hawaiian Islands, I had so many individuals who were non-Polynesian learning medicinal work, which I actually have no problem with. I love that. But then they start to change their whole entire visage to try to appear to be more Aboriginal. I'm like, well, then now you missed the boat.
Hmm.
If you are being gifted the language and the insight, you're being gifted that, then take it and add it to your vocabulary. But don't put the feather in the hair. This is the culture is not a costume. Focus inward on the medicine. And I think that we've gotten lost along the way. We are no longer thinking about it as intermediary. Now it's going into complete synthetic shamanism, where
Mm.
it's a download of a download of a download that someone else had, and I'm going to put on the hat and put on the feather and put on the cape, but I actually don't know where the resonance is. Take the information, strip it down to its purest decimal point, and speak from that place, not from the place of the cultural practitioner. So from there, plastic shamanism and synthetic shamanism is literally trying to put on the skin of another person that doesn't belong to you. Think about what you said earlier. If you go down to its actual form of the decimal of being human, humanoid, and star connectors, then the intermediary is easy. Then technically we're all shamans. I'm like heated today. I'm just a lot
I
going
love
on.
that. You know, I think when people get knowledge, they have to understand where it comes from. And I'm going to use the Native Americans as an example.
Mhm,
You know, they integrated so many things of nature, of
mhm,
elements, and they
mhm,
understood the value in that. And in their ceremonies, in their medicinal work, they incorporated all of that. So whether it be the feather of an eagle, which had specific meaning that the feather is a resonance of an air element, and in that air element, it allowed them to be closer connected into spirit, and therefore the headdress was the representation of wearing it on the head of the crown where the consciousness resides to expand that out through the visceral wings of feathers to obtain information. to become more a part of the information and not of the physical representation in which it has.
Mhm.
And
So, with that being said, let's just say that I'm studying shamanism 101 from an Aboriginal practitioner in Zimbabwe. And I observe that they're wearing very specific jewels and costume for them, right? But if I adopt it as my own, it's actually technically not my own unless I am feeling like I'm being gifted that. So, for example, let's just say that a hawk feather falls from the canopy above you. That would be an example of a gift that you can then take and make a part of your practice, as opposed to trying to literally copy of a copy, replace the visage of someone else into your visage. But that, to me, that misses the point. I do think that medicinal work, when it's passed down shamanically, should be passed down and taught, regardless of what the cultural background is. I'm a huge fan of that.
right,
I'm not a fan of needing to call it something that it is not, that doesn't resonate for you. I'm not a fan of that. I don't agree with that. And I say that to Aboriginal practitioners. Me as an Aboriginal, I was Aboriginally trained, right? I think that we have missed the mark with a lot of this. And that's when it starts to turn into a copy of a copy of a copy.
right. And then it loses its meaning, it loses its authenticity,
Mhm.
and it gets perpetuated in a way that is
Yep.
false. And people put
Yep.
on this persona and not really coming from their authentic person. Their authentic person
100%.
might be, someone who likes to wear suits, right? And they may wear a suit and tie, or they may wear, a dress or some fashion. And now they change who they are because now they've donned this, uh, you know, cultural type of clothing, and they become mystically something else.
Yeah, and I understand why, because we want to emulate, right? And that's
Right.
that. I totally get that we want to emulate. We feel more connected to that, but I do think that we lose the authentic thread when we do not know who we are. If you go into a practice and you're studying a shamanic background, but you don't know who you are beforehand, it's very easy for you to emulate someone else because you don't know who you are. So then you
Right.
say, perhaps that's who I am. But then when the tides of change happen again, you're going to say, hold on a second. But that's who I am over there. So our goal is to gain vocabulary to amplify your bag of tricks, to amplify your vocabulary so you can find who you are. Or eventually you won't need to know the differences between, is it a costume or is it a calling? Because it's all just resonance. It's all just a calling, not a costume.
I love that.
That's an opening.
We could go so deep on some of these
Oh my
because,
gosh, Glenn.
there is such an accountability that's required today when we start to learn these, that we deliver them in their most singular, authentic meaning. And not to
Hmm.
mean that we can't put our own spin on it or take some of the things that we've learned in different areas and say, I like this particular part of this learning that I learned that might have been shamanic, and I bring this into my own because it resonates with the authenticity of who I am.
Hmm.
But we can't say that, okay, now everything that I've learned is all me. This is my calling. We all have spiritual mentors as we go through this journey of learning of who we are. And we also need to pay homage and respect to those learnings and teachings because we need to keep those authentic. And when we create something for ourselves, that becomes our own authenticity. And if somebody
I'm a
wants to copy that, that's also great as well. But we need to say, yes, this is, I've learned this from Kimo. I've learned this from this particular person. I've
yeah.
learned this from this other person. And when I have a client, it gives me the opportunity to bring in all of these little elements because I'm resonating with that client. And now I can give this particular teaching or this particular instructional information that might help on their development.
Yes. When I have clients come in who I train or who I mentor, who go through my Light Seer pedagogy, One of the very first things that we learn is breath work, and I teach them how we do it in Hawaiian culture, and I teach them what it means. But then my exact language is, and now the practice is yours, which means it is time for you to adopt it. It is also time for you to change it.
Mm.
It is now yours to change, which means that if you are going to use the Hawaiian language that I teach you, I want you to keep it in this form. If you want to change it, please change it. Just don't call it that. Call it something else. Make up your own language if you want to. And that to me is a way to show reverence towards a cultural shamanic background without needing to co-opt it. Utilize it, but don't pretend that it is what it's not.
Right.
Right? And that right there is a conversation that is being had really across the board between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal practitioners. Because even as an Aboriginal practitioner coming from an Aboriginal background, there is going to be combative behaviors even within the Aboriginal community. There are practitioners who say, Kimo, you should not be teaching this because this is the unspoken language, that we're not allowed to spread that information. And I say, well, I disagree. I disagree. In my own Hawaiian practice, we believe that the student will arise when appropriate. And if my insight that I have access to, if my student never arises and I pass away, then the information was meant to be extinct. I don't believe that. I believe that insight is insight. And you can go through a shamanic background if you want to help provide insight. But when I speak to some of my own Hawaiian practitioners who say, but you shouldn't be using these languages, I say, well, but my results are high yielding. My results are in the 99th percentile. And what does that mean? It means that we're taking the vocabulary, transmuting it to make sense for everyone else now, not specifically just for the Hawaiian culture. And how do we allow ourselves to flow that information so that everyone uses it as a nexus point? That's one of my goals within our pedagogy, is to really train you to access that. And that's happening in the Hawaiian community. So there's no right or wrong to this. You're never going to make everyone happy. So when it comes back down to the seed of the thought, which is, where does it become plastic? Where does it become synthetic? It's when you're co-opting it and not understanding the authentic, pure nature of what the medicine was. That's when it's synthetic. Because it's not yours.
Right.
Which, Glenn, takes us into AI. You ready to talk about it?
Yeah, we can dive right into AI because, this is where it's another slippery slope. There's so much good information that can be reflected back to us through artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we move forward using that information appropriately? And can we not create another church of artificial intelligence, so to speak?
Well, I think that what people don't understand is two things: the way that AI is wired and the way that our brain is wired. So let's talk about the brain for a moment. We know by studying the brain that if the brain is given insight that it did not have to learn, it doesn't resonate. It doesn't hit. Why? Because it didn't go through your synaptic wiring. It's kind of like cramming for a test. You only got this much bandwidth and you put all the insight in there, then you take the test and you forget everything afterwards. Because you were only transiently holding on to the information. Well, the same thing happens with AI. If it does not actually come from you, it's not going to land with high resonance. You'll get excited about it. You'll get curious about it. And if that happens with AI, then take the time and learn it. Mm-hmm. If AI gives you insight, great. Take the time. What I encourage everyone to do when it comes to AI learning, when you get insight that you think is exciting, say it out loud. Repeat it over and over and over again, and then get rid of the AI. Say it in your words over and over and over again so that your brain says, now I got it. But the problem is everyone is going through synthetic learning. They're saying AI is the answer, that's the answer. But if I were to ask you that same question next week, you won't know the answer. Mm-hmm. Because it didn't come from you. You didn't take the time to put it into your synaptic wiring. So that's part one. Part two is not realizing that AI is actually designed to fit your narrative. You literally train it, right? You train it to speak in your voice, which means AI can absolutely fabricate truths that are not true. It'll fabricate statistics that are actually not real, which is why if you were to use AI, you must say, cite the resource. If you just say, what's the percentage of this? It'll say, well, the percentage is this, but it completely can make it up if you don't go to its actual resource. But people aren't spending the time doing that.
That's right. And, you know, with any bit of information, you need to fact check it. And fact checking is actually more than just going to other resources, but
Hmm.
how is that information really resonating within your body,
Hmm.
within your very first instrument of receiving? If you're getting a piece of information that automatically you're like, oh, that can't be true, but because the computer said it's so, it must be so.
Hmm.
You're already surpassing your first level of what you should be saying. This didn't feel right. There's something that
Hmm.
doesn't resonate. The frequency of that information is not in alignment with me. And then investigate why it isn't in alignment and then check the
Exactly.
information.
Exactly. I don't want to say I get tired of this because this will happen until the world is no more, which is how our brains are wired. But when someone says, I don't like that, well, you saying I don't like that is only your opinion. If you say, I don't like that because I'm having a feeling, okay, well, then either you need to do one of two things. The first thing you need to do is to sit with that feeling and get to know why I'm feeling off. And the second thing is to do exactly what you just said, research. Research why you think it is off. And if you cannot find any resources to help quantify what that emotion is, then more than likely it's just an opinion.
Mhm.
And you can afford to either hold the opinion or let it go. But we've got to learn why we behave in certain ways when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to the brain. This is why the brain must be studied when you are a person who wants to put yourself in service, either as a medium, as a psychic, as a channeler, as a guide, it doesn't matter. Learn why the brain does what it does while learning your craft.
Absolutely. And also learn why this thing is that you want to be in service. If you're going to teach spirituality
Mhm.
in any flavor of that it comes in, what is your purpose? Is your purpose to be in service to others because you have profoundly learned something that has modified your life in such a way that it resonates so deeply that you feel compelled to teach? Or is it because you got likes or you got followers
Right.
or something you said just piqued somebody's interest and all of a sudden people are asking you questions? Because one is
That part
egoic
right
and
there.
one is not.
Exactly. And what I find really fascinating is that we get those two confused so easily.
Mm.
And again, I've got so many clients, Glenn, who truly well-intentioned, very talented, high-yielding results, but still say, well, my guide said that I'm the one who's supposed to do all this for all of humanity. And I said, well, if you could hear that that message is reverberated across millions of people, would you still feel special? Because the guides are telling everybody that, because everyone's job is to do that. Then, oh, but I thought if you feel defeated because it affects the ego, then that message really was just a radio beacon that you picked up on and you weren't the right tempo. You weren't in the right template for that. I am a huge fan of learning what a healthy ego is. We must learn what that is. I could easily say my job is to be the highest seer of the whole entire world. And I even, as a little bit of an aside, I even pushed against the language of high seer. It was just the title that was given to
Right.
me as when I was going through this practice, right? But when we take a look at, is it my desire to be in service to the collective? Great. If that's what it is, but like what you said earlier, then it doesn't have to go through you. It goes through your insight, but you're not the nexus to everybody. And then you have individuals who do it for complete ego. Lots of followers on social media, a lot of engagement. I mean, you'll get nauseated by how many people on social media, their entire platform is just responding to paranormal investigators or just responding to all this fear talk. Like it's just I'm responding to this scary ghost story. Well, that's just trying to create attention without any education. And I'm not a fan of that.
And that has nothing to do with spirituality.
Nothing to do with spirituality. Nothing. Nothing. I'm really fiery today. Got a lot of energy today. I'm like gravy.
I love it. I love it. You know, and let's dive into another subject that I think is interwoven with this as well, because um, a lot of people look for shortcuts,
Mm.
right? Life hacks. That's a common
Mhm.
terminology.
Mhm.
What's the life hack to spirituality? How can I get into that, that channel, that clairvoyance, that clairaudience? And I'm, you know, this is one of my favorite things is like, well, what do you have to lose? And they're like,
Mm.
what do you mean? I want to learn how to channel so I can, produce this profound information.
Mhm.
What do you have to lose? What is holding you from that
Mhm.
experience? Because you already have these abilities to channel. It's your awareness that you're not maybe giving credence to,
Mhm.
and there's something else behind that. Why do you need to learn that? What is your initiative to learn this information? What is your intention behind it? And there's so many people using shortcuts like, oh, I can do it through psychedelics, through different
Mm.
mystical experiences that will be these door openers. And yes, they are door openers, but they take a lot of time to integrate that experience if it's truly an experience that is profound and meant for you.
Mhm.
And it leads to more information. It's the first initial breadcrumb. But people become dependent on this, and it becomes the new drug of like, oh, I need another experience. I got to do another microdose. I need more DMT. I need this. And they haven't vetted out their first initial experience. And I know you've
I
got some commentary on that.
well, I try to remain neutral as possible because I actually I think I have an opinion for sure, but I do think that if someone is in requirement to do that to kind of jumpstart the engine, then I have no problem with that at
Mm,
all. But I do have a problem when it becomes the only conduit. Meaning like I can only channel when I've, you know, quickly smoked something. Okay, well then you're dependent on that. Then the channel itself is actually taking energy. And here's the part that people don't realize. When you take any substance, and I'm a huge fan of medicinal work, huge fan of it, but it takes your energy though.
mhm.
And though you might get to a place of channeling, of profound insight, of large enlightenment afterwards, it still drains your energy. But people aren't focused on that part. They're only focused on this work. So, how can we make that productive? If you know that every single time you take psilocybin mushrooms, it's going to drain the energy before you amplify the field, then what do you have to do? Amplify the energy before you take it. People aren't doing that. Why? Because they want a quick result without
Mhm.
any work. So then what happens? You'll get insight. So the insight balances up 25%, but you've dropped 30%. So then you come back and you're like, oh, I'm excited about this thing, but now I don't know how to integrate it.
Mhm.
But now I don't know what to do with that. So then what do? But I want to get back there again. So you do it again. You keep on making the same mistake over and over and over again. I feel like I can be so helpful to the world if I can do this, but then when it's all done, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to integrate it. Because you dropped and drained the field without building up the momentum first, which is completely nescient from Aboriginal work. That's not how Aboriginal work is taught. So again, it goes back to plastic shamanism. You're not
Mhm.
taught that. You're taught, well, we're all going to calm our minds and meditate and light a candle and set an intention. Okay, girl, but that's not starting the work. That's just setting an intention. What is all the work before that? What is all the work that you're doing to get yourself to a place so when the body drains and you get that insight, they equal
Mm.
themselves out.
I love that. I couldn't be in more perfect alignment with that insight because, many of our indigenous cultures, and it depends on what continent that you're on, it was treated as its own energy. So whatever we're working with,
Yes.
whatever medicinal energy, it's its own entity, it's its own energy. And in order to absorb the fullness of what it has to offer, we need to make sure that we are in a vibratory match with that. And
Mm-hmm.
that could be meditation, that could be a hydrating water diet for a couple of
Mm-hmm.
days, it could
Mm-hmm.
be singing and dancing and bringing up certain other energies in
Mm-hmm.
order to be in receivership of what this has to offer us. And in today's society, we're on that quick fix, like, oh, gotta get it, gotta get it, gotta get it, gotta happen now. But that is not the most important part. It
Mm-hmm.
is that ascension of buildup to be in receivership of what that has to offer. We can't short skip what needs to be done, the prior work. It's like, let's build this house. Okay, quickly, let's get the framer in. Let's get the sheetrocker in. Let's get the
Mm-hmm.
electrician and the plumber in. Oh, we forgot about the foundation, the most important thing that's going to hold all of this up. We forgot the guys that are going to work with the concrete or the block or set the forms or dig the hole that's going to hold the load of all of this structure.
Yeah.
And that's no different about learning from these mystical experiences from psychedelics.
Yeah. This kind of goes back to the question where does the healer need to be healed?
Hmm.
Does the intuitive need to know intuition? And you're gonna find that there's strong yeses and nos on both sides of that question, right? But I do think that all these individuals who are saying, I just want to be the channeler, I just want to be the guide, I just want to be the psychic, without doing any developmental work, shows that you yourself are actually not at a place to be in service because you're still trying to work through the ego. And there's a major difference between me working as your healer being unhealed,
Hmm.
And granted, healing is subjective, but if I don't know what that means for me, meaning that I'm going to be reliant on feeling good because I just helped someone out, which is feeding my ego. I do 5 clients a day. And it's if I only led by what I can perceive for them, they make a breakthrough, they feel better, I feel good because I help them, then that's only servicing my ego, even though I think that my job is to be in service. If I do not know how to make sure that my body is rested and mentally flourished and vulnerable when appropriate, if I don't know how to do that on my own, then I'm literally just throwing my seed out and I'm not planting anything in return. And I have to plant something in return. I don't know if you've seen this, Glenn, but when you are working with a brand new healer, we'll use healing as an example, their longevity is very short lived because they will all use the energy of the physical body first
Hmm.
until they learn that it doesn't ever work. And then after that, when they go through the actual awakening, not the like insight, the actual awakening is my body is so drained, I can't do this anymore.
Hmm.
So am I going to stop or am I going to push through?
Right.
That's when your awakening happens. Is when you push through and you realize I can't use my body anymore. And that's when you start to actually understand real channeling.
Right. And, you can't take every client, you can't take every appointment. There needs to be stops and places where we're regenerating
Yep.
our own energy so
Yep.
we could be at our best for the next client. In my pedagogy, I want to be the very best as I was for the first client, as I was for the last client of the day. Every experience for that person is valuable enough to me that it has to be fresh and authentic and new and receptive and vulnerable. So it's so important to take the time to integrate everything that happens during the day outside of being the facilitator for someone's
Hmm.
healing or learning, and we need to, find that boundary, what works for us in the amount of energy that we're dispensing. How do we replenish that? So
Hmm.
that's always, we have that ability to perceive at the highest level.
Well, let's amplify that in two different ways. So let's just say that you have one client that you're working with tomorrow. Amplifying the field, you amplify your field and you work with the field and the client feels better, you're good, you go on. But let's just say that you use the same practice, but you've got five clients or
Mm.
four clients. Well, that practice is not going to sustain because that practice only sustained one, but you want to sustain four or you want to sustain five. So what needs to happen is two different things. The first thing is your exercise beforehand has to be different. The second reason why we do that is because it's not fair to the client. Your last client of the day should not feel any residual exhaustion from you because the first client of the day drained all your energy.
Hmm.
Not fair to them, and it is not fair to your body. Your body then goes back into your own body reserves. If you've only built up enough energy for two clients and you're on your third one, now the body is going to use its own energy. It's kind of like ketosis, but it literally eats energy.
Right. And, you know, part of this is where I call us being the perpetual student is, we need to learn
Mm-hmm.
those things, and we need to understand when some clients maybe absorb more energy from us than we anticipate, that we
Mm-hmm.
know how to rejuvenate and recalibrate in a way that works good for us to be just as fresh for that next client. And that is constant change. That changes all
Constant.
the time. There's no constant cookie cutter that makes every client the same, right?
So
And
let's just say that my first client of the day, Glenn, is a big old drain, and you know what those are like, right? Like it's not even intentional, but someone is a drain. So when I go to my next client 15 minutes after them, I'm extra drained. So if I don't know my system well enough, I'm gonna assume that just to kind of get my energy back in touch will be the same before I go to the next client, but I'm actually extra drained. I have got to know that I'm extra drained, and I've got to know what are the fastest ways for me to re-amplify for the second client of the day, and then for the third client of the day. So it's constant recalibrations. The whole entire day that you're working, it's always doing this.
I love that. And, for so many different people, we can use different things. And I want to jump into the next one, which is
Yeah.
talking about animism and tech and the re-enchantment of objects.
Mm.
There's so much we could go into. For me personally, I know that crystals and gems and
Mm-hmm.
certain talisman have energy because scientifically we can
Mm-hmm.
measure their frequential resonance and
Mm-hmm.
what frequencies they operate. And we also
Mm-hmm.
know that through our technology components that, quartz crystal is a storage center. So
Mm-hmm.
we know also about our pyramids that they are both generators and receivers of information.
Mm-hmm.
But when we start to take things as different levels and we're saying that these particular objects are possessed,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, let's dive into that because I know you love this.
So that right there with the spiritual community, that is an outline that we've adopted from the dogmatic religious community. Meaning that, in religion, specifically Catholicism, which then perpetuated this thought that went into the Baptist Church and the Presbyterian Church and more, which was that demons are going to affect your mind, some kind of fallen host from God's army that fell and blah 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 blah, all this stuff. And the belief system that your mind is susceptible and vulnerable to anything outside of God, which is going to be considered demonic. And all of that is just a fear tactic, right? So you don't that way you only pray to one monotheistic thing. So when we remove ourselves from religious dogma, the spiritual community still does it. They still believe those things without realizing it. Curses are real because of that. Someone can put a bad curse on your family because of that. You still believe that it's real, it's just wearing a different face. And when you go down to pure frequency, meaning that I'm doing a reading on someone who's crossed over on the other side. I don't know anything about them, but I get all the insight, all the information as if I knew them without knowing anything about them. That's pure insight. When you speak to pure insight over the thousands and thousands and thousands of people I've ever communicated to on the other side, never have they said, "Oh, I hope you put me into a doll. I hope you put me into some kind of object," because spiritual frequency has no desire to inhabit some kind of inanimate object. It does not exist. But our brains, our human brains, if they are wired to focus on fear, can't make sense of that. They'll say, well, I do feel something from this object. Well, yeah, you can feel a connection. You can feel that let's just say that these glasses were worn by my great grandfather. I might feel his energy on it. I might feel that he loved and he required these glasses. But if I don't develop my ability, because I'm only relying on my talent, if I don't develop my ability, my brain is going to say, must be my grandfather possessing those glasses. Mm-hmm. That is lack of development, lack of transmutation. And every garage psychic and garage healer and garage medium who uses language like, I know that there's some kind of something inhabiting that object, you're going to really struggle with this information. I get so much what I call fan mail or hate mail. I get so much every single day. And many of it is based on people in the religious community or in the spiritual community who thinks that it's their job to be the savior, who will say, well, no, but in my practice, things are haunted. I'm like, well, you haven't developed it then. You haven't developed it. No, but I have found in some clients that they are possessed. Well, you haven't developed it then. If you still believe that, and if your results are only yielding of possessions of objects and people, then you are not trained well enough to be working with the collective. Mm-hmm. That is old dogma in the spiritual community. It's very archaic. It has no place in our modern theology of how we're moving towards spiritual beliefs. That's still old. And it will be perceived as real if you think that it is real. So now back to it. Does Annabelle exist? Absolutely not. Does she exist in the hyperbole of what you want her to exist? Like, I'm being possessed. If you believe that she's possessed, she is. But is there spirit in there? No. Have you spiritualized her? Yes.
I love that you mentioned Annabelle. We must have been on the telepathic wavelength of this. And the reason why I say Annabelle specifically is because Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were the investigators of this paranormal, who now own the Annabelle doll. Well, that Annabelle doll resides in the same town that I live in Monroe, Connecticut, and you can research that because that is fact. It doesn't have any effect on me, and I live on the same town.
That's fascinating, by the way.
Thank you. I've seen the Annabelle doll, and if you go through the internet, you will probably find a picture of me and the Annabelle doll together.
Fun!
And I have not ever felt anything other than, this is a doll that had a connection with a person. That's all I've ever felt in my awareness. And I agree is that, we have to, as spiritual people, as a spiritual teacher, if we think that we are, as this human being, unlimited, then why do we adopt a narrative that limits us?
That limits you. Exactly. What you wouldn't do it. There are so many people who in this life are huge zealots, but when you talk to them on the other side, they literally say, "Oh, I literally knew nothing." There's so much more here that's unlimited that I limited when I was living. That's what they say. But again, if I'm an underdeveloped medium and I don't know what that means, I'm going to only be able to perceive an echo of a frequency personality type that says, oh yeah, they're still really angry. They have a lot of that. And you'll pick up on that field because it's a personality type, but that's not spirit. That's just a personality type you're picking up on.
Right.
Right. And if you look at any of the posts on social media on the Annabelle doll, you're going to find all of the believers who still believe that old dogma. Mm-hmm. They'll say, by the light of Christ, I don't want anything bad to happen to me when I read this. I hope that person has made sure that they're completely clear. That thing is evil. You need to burn it. everyone in the comments is going to be using language like that because that's the narrative that we give them. It is not their fault. That is the vocabulary that we have given the community. So that's what they believe.
Right. And when we look at it from a scientific position, that energy is always looking for balance. It's
Hmm.
looking for that neutrality. It's not looking negative, wants to become more balanced, so it looks towards the positive. And
Hmm.
we need to look at these narratives when we come across them and say, well, what can I learn from this dogmatic perception in order to enlighten people, to give them the opportunity of another point of perception that maybe it doesn't have these possessive things, and maybe I'm picking up on something that I need to further develop that awareness to better
Hmm.
understand
Yeah.
what physical sensation, what mental sensation, what is coming over me that I need to better understand. Is it coming from a place of fear? Is it coming from a place of enlightenment? How is all of this resonant? And to start asking yourself questions about why, what,
But
how.
that's what training is for. So I'll give you an example. Recently, I respond sometimes on social media to videos that I get sent, and someone was doing a response. A woman who called herself, she called herself a new psychic, and she was doing a response on a haunted house, and she was looking at a photo, and she was saying all these things that she could see inside of the photo, paranormal activity. And I responded in the comments that, well, that's not an ethical way to do a reading because no one's validating you. You have to be out. You have to
Mhm.
have someone validating the things that you can see. Otherwise, you're just using your imagination. There's no way to validate that. When you just say, "I see this in the picture," well, all the people in the comments are like, "Oh my gosh, you're right, you're right, you're right," and she's got so many followers. And I was just challenging her. I said, "Well, you're not working ethically. You're actually not working evidentially. None of us actually know that what you're doing is real. None of us know." And her response to me was, "Well, you can't say that to me because that's my experience." I'm like, "Yeah, that's your experience, but your experience is now influencing thousands and thousands of individuals who think that this is the way that you should be working with energy, with no validations, with no quantifiable validations." And she says, "Well, just because you work this way doesn't mean I can't work this way." And to be honest, she's right. Just because I work ethically and I work as a person who educates doesn't mean that they can't do that. I just think that the results are not going to be yielding. Why? When you work with neutral energy, you don't ever have to drop your field in order
Mhm.
to perceive neutral energy. Every single time you perceive something scary, stuck, harboring in an object, you have to drop your field. And you can quantify that by measuring your body. Literally hook you up to electrodes, tune in to things that make you scared as shit. Your field has to drop before you feel enlightened. And when you work with developing, you'll never do that again. Why would you ever want to do that?
Right.
It's not helpful.
You're telling yourself, I need to be less in order to perceive.
Exactly. So, and again, the people that push against it is that you're hurting their feelings. Well, I've always done it like this. Great, learn more. But that's the way that it's been for me, and I found out that this place really is haunted. Great, then do more. Do more. Don't be reliant on simply just your talent.
Hmm. I love that. And this leads into just another subject matter is,
Mhm.
the authenticity versus mass spiritual brands. When teachings are commoditized and commodified, they're sold as, these are activations, these are so calls, or these are
Mhm.
life openings. And many people walk away from spending tens and thousands of dollars at these retreats, and they walk away and like, I didn't get anything from that. Or
Yeah.
they they sometimes will say, well, I felt this, I thought I felt that. And they're saying that because they don't want to look foolish for spending $10,000 going into this particular retreat and following this person who's, you know, supposedly the healer, the
Mhm.
guru of this. Um, and I myself have fallen into this trap where, like, oh, this person
Mhm.
is really knowledgeable. They have a certain charisma about them. They have a certain way where their words resonate. And when I delved into getting to actually know this person, I'm like, wow,
Mm,
they haven't done their shadow work and they're coming from a part that is not
hmm.
necessarily authentic, but certainly monetized and driven by the masses of people.
Yeah. So when we take a look at that, let me speak from my own perspective. If I'm doing a workshop in front of a whole bunch of people, and for the most part, there's really, really high results that I have. But let's just say, and it just happened recently, someone says, I didn't get anything from that. Oh, this is really hard for me. Then we do two things. The very first thing we say is, are you in belief system that what my information is can be of assistance? And if the answer is yes, then that's a different conversation. But if the answer is I don't know, or I don't know, then I believe that my job as the educator in that moment is to take the time with just that person, to separate them from the crowd and say, let's just talk about you. What is it that you have to offer? What is unique to you? Because when I'm doing a workshop, I'm speaking objectively.
Right.
Here's tools, here's insights, but we're not working subjectively. And if someone doesn't get a subjective understanding, then you must work with them subjectively. I'll have to say, great. So, how can I reformulate the conversation or attune to them specifically to get them to be at a place where they can feel more shifting, more insight? And that's me being able to not be a synthetic shaman. If I don't know the information, it goes back to the original conversation. If I'm just AIing everything and if I don't know the insight, I'm not going to know how to pivot it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not mine. If you say, well, I downloaded all the insight on AI and I taught it to you, you don't get it, but I don't know how to help you because I don't know what's outside of that download. I have got to know the insight to come from me. So one person who doesn't get it, it's easy. You have a conversation with them. You readjust the language. Give them a different allegory if you need to. And then they'll understand.
Absolutely. And it's about that connection that continues to breed the authenticity because it's not a broadcast of like, hey, I'm trying to cast a net. Here, yes, we do this type of work in retreats, and it's service oriented, and we can't speak to everybody individually during a large experience, but when somebody comes back to you with information, it's this is the most important part of the work,
Yeah.
right? Is to help them bridge into seeing something or to understanding so they can embody that. Or they can
You know,
embody at least the reason why maybe they didn't see it or understand it or have an
right.
experience, right? To flush that out properly.
I think that when people are opening a business, I mean, even though I'm in session, this is my business. It's my business that I run. I have a lot of forms that people can sign afterwards if they want, if they take a session or a course from me, meaning what didn't work, what could I improve on, what worked really well for me, what didn't I quite get. And
Mm.
as challenging as it might be for the ego, you read it. You read the information, you say, wow, but I really loved how I delivered that. But consistently, it's not being seen as helpful, so I'm going to change it.
Right.
And we need to be able to do that. I need to read my intake forms and my feedback forms to say, okay, this is working, that's not working. That's not working for people. How can I do it differently?
Right. And to take that feedback constructively and start to say, okay,
Yes.
where are the changes that I can make? And could it be verbiage? Could it be my presentation? Could it be
Hmm.
the amount of people that we take in so we can continue to cultivate the highest results?
Hmm.
So that is such a big piece of things that, is important because this is where we take a look. And sometimes we may take a look at it from hurting the ego a little bit like, oh,
Yeah.
hmm.
Yeah.
But not to take it personally, but take it constructively,
Yep.
right? From that non-bias, looking it as, non-judgmental information.
And again, if I wasn't able to read that information and make a course correction, then I would know from the very beginning, oh, but then my sessions are being led by my ego. But I have to be correct. I don't want to make any changes. Okay, well, that's my ego.
Hmm.
So it's
And
a good exercise.
again, that's part of being the student, right? Because
Hmm.
you're constantly learning. You can't say it's going to be this way. This is the only way. This is the way I do it, and if you don't like it, then go find somebody else.
Yep, exactly.
That's just a poor way of accepting it,
Yeah.
right? From the ego.
Hmm.
So let's
Good
dive
point.
into another fun topic.
Hmm.
And this is like right in the midst of the media and the news today, and we're talking about 3 AI Atlas and the comments that are coming in and disclosure and starseed narratives and galactic politics and things that are coming into our universe that is creates a lot of controversy and how there's a discrepancy between what we maybe be able to perceive a little bit better about the framework of interstellar um, beings and intelligence that are coming in and how that is going to shape or reactivate our remembrance of maybe who we are. Let's talk a little bit about all of those controversies that are happening right now.
Well, Glenn, I don't spend a lot of time like researching different forms of AI. So a lot of the narrative that people are using, I actually am not even exposed to. So you
Mhm.
might have to help me out a little bit because I'm not in it when people are like I'm not looking at AI. So I don't really know what all the nuances of all the like details are of some of these things. So will you explain to me, and for any other listener who's similar to me doesn't really know what AI Atlas is, what is that?
So there is something that was first seen by our astronomers and those who are looking at the stars have
Okay.
noticed that there was a body coming to us into our solar system, and it was labeled 3 AI Atlas. So this is an
Okay.
interstellar body that is coming. So we've kind of labeled it through our mainstream science astronomers as a comet that is quickly approaching our planetary systems and has already breached into our solar system and now is coming to larger planets like Jupiter and Mars. And it has something that's different that's happening from ordinary comets. Normally, we can track ordinary comets that
Mm-hmm.
come in and out of our solar system, but this one is acting differently and is acting at a very fast speed and is course correcting as it goes through the celestial bodies of our solar system.
Mm.
In the disclosure world, which is, and I don't even necessarily like that disclosure because it is dependent on we are deriving information from someone else who we deem as an authority, right? And we can call
Mm-mm.
that government.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say that our disclosure happens through the inner work in which we do.
Mm-hmm.
By our inner work and looking at ourselves and looking at our shadows and continuing to develop our own spirituality and consciousness, we start to understand that through the expansion of perception, there are many more things that exist simultaneously within our world. And we truly are interdimensional beings,
Mm-hmm.
right? But through disclosure, we're relying on someone to give us authentic information. And
Mm.
there are many people out there that use different levels of consciousness called remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
And they've remote viewed this particular object and have labeled it as a craft with beings of another world out of our universe that are coming into our solar system. So there's a lot of this narratives that are cropping up that these are extraterrestrials that are here to save us. There are extraterrestrials that are here to conquer our planet or take over. So there's many different narratives that are happening right now. And I think what's really important is to help people understand how, if they're, you know, listening, working, integrating some of this information,
Mm-hmm.
how to discern what truth is
So
and where that information is coming from.
Thank you for explaining all of that. I did not know any of that information, and it's helpful to hear that. There's a major difference between what we think is our downloaded intuition versus instinct.
Hmm.
Major difference. Well, how do you know those differences? You develop it. But the biggest difference is, and you can find this, I'm sure that if I were to look up AI Atlas, I'd find all the fear conspiracy people, right? It would say, oh, it's definitely this. That's all instinct. Instinct is a safety mechanism. So if any insight comes forward because of lack of safety or needing more safety, that's instinct. My instinct tells me it is this. That's instinct. It's not intuition. Intuition is pure, neutral, downloaded information. Now, I'm I haven't tuned in specifically to whatever this craft, comet, asteroid, whatever that is, but just now, as you're speaking, for me as a quantum seer, I actually want to spend some more time later outside of this to do a real channel. But just listening to you speak, I'm simultaneously, you see me writing at the same time. I'm simultaneously writing all the things that I can see right now without even being asked. I've never been asked this question before. No one's asked me this question, right? But I could really briefly go into what I perceive without doing a direct channel. And maybe if I get a direct channel, I'll do more insight. But when it comes to that, whatever this is, it to me right now, I think that the language of alien intelligence is misunderstood because technically alien intelligence is of access at any point without it needing to be in a terrestrial body. At any point. You can tune into the Pleiadian galaxy right now without needing to have a big purple dude standing in front of you. You can do it right now, right? So when we look at it from that perspective, I think that the idea of is it aliens coming in to take over our world, that's thinking like a caveman. It's not really thinking energetically. But when you look at just right now what it looks like in terms of what's entering, I'm going to give you an analogy. It looks like a slingshot. It looks like something has been pulled back and let go intentionally, not random. It does look intentional, so that makes me curious. But when I'm listening to you, I'm quickly asking questions, but just give me a very quick visual without doing a direct channel. What is going to be helpful for me to see? It looks like two different things. The very first thing that it looks like is that it looks like it resonates with whatever's coming through, whether that's a download, there'll probably be a wave of insight that comes in from people, but it looks root related. Now remember that our brains, when we intuit or channel information, can only access its current vocabulary. So my vocabulary is very attuned to color. So for me, I see the root, right? So whatever the slingshot trajectory is coming in for us right now, it is a stimulant of root energy, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't go root, sacral, chest, throat. It goes root, crown. So if you and I bet you through your light language and my ability to channel, I bet you we could find some really fun information, Glenn. But right now, it looks like whatever insight is coming through is going to stimulate root, and it looks like because root is needed, it's kind of like if we could give the comment a voice, it would kind of say something like that. Root is necessary right now. We already know that in our U.S. economy anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But then it looks like if root is stimulated, it goes directly to crown. And again, bypasses the whole entire energetic system. And the as the quick aside, when it comes to chakra, chakra is not specific to the human biome. Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about what does my body need in its root. It's what does the world need in its root versus what is the high level of pure understanding. So that's fascinating. I want to do more channeled work on this. I've never been asked this question before, so I don't know if that answered why you brought it up. I don't know why. I don't know the answer to the question.
Well, let's leave it off as a to be continued, that there will be some
Right.
more information. And that might be in another podcast, or it might be in something that Kimo might talk about on one of his video shorts that you can find on
Yes.
social
Well,
media.
I'm definitely going to do a little bit of a deep dive because now I'm really curious. Now I'm really curious. And I mean, it's interesting because I just this morning was looking at another channeler and they were talking about AI Atlas. And I was like, I'm just going to swipe because I don't know what that means. And I don't want to spend the time to take a look at it right now. But thank you for that introduction. I'm curious. I'm curious now.
Kimo, I'd love to talk a little bit more about your pedagogy and all of the great things that you offer if you're watching this video, if you found it interesting, where can we find you, and what can we learn from Kimo? What are some of the specific things that you can help develop in us to be
I
our better
appreciate
selves?
that, Glenn. So if you go onto my website, thelightseer.com, you'll find a variety of ways to contact or to learn from me. I have something that we call the Light Path membership. And basically what that is access to come in and meet with me up to 4 times a month. Every month I do seminars. Every month I do attunements, which is our meditations. We have meditations that are released every single month that are meant to attune. They're not just think of a stream. They're literally activating journalistic questions. You get a journal every single month. We have our Q&As. Our Q&As are activations. It'll take a topic point and we'll do a long exercise with it. And then we also have modular learning. We have courses. We have courses in intuition. We have courses in healing. So that's all a part of my Light Path membership. And to me, I find that my motivation to offer all these services is to give you a well-rounded approach to being able to attune to yourself, whether you think of yourself as a spiritual being, as a theosophical being, as just someone who wants to take intuition and amplify it for your business. You could utilize it for that. I've got a lot of producers who take these courses, a lot of directors who take the courses. So it doesn't have to be the spiritualist, but everything with energy work is an amplification of what you desire for it to be. So you're more than welcome to take a look at that learning on that platform. And when it comes to channeling this information, I think that I might have to do another course on this if I can get some really good insight, because this has been fun.
Kimo, it's always a pleasure to have you here on the podcast. For our viewers, there will be some embedded information. So if you want to get hold of Kimo, and if you're interested in his courses and classes and workshops, just go to the very end of this video, and in the write-up, you'll see all of his information on how to get hold of Kimo, and also if you'd like to get hold of me as well. Kimo, are there any last thoughts or any words you'd like to leave our viewers with today?
I want to leave the viewers with one last thought, and it's been really helpful for me when I think about AI. So I try to figure out how can I resonate with AI in a different way where the information is coming from me. We talked about that a lot today. When the information comes from you, even if you're learning from AI, is to restructure the acronym. I restructure the acronym to be authentic intelligence, which means that when you're getting the insight from AI, reformulate it, talk it out loud, speak about it until you know it with every synaptic wiring that you possess, so that way you can pivot the information as required with authentic learning.
I love that. Kimo, thank you for spending some time with us today. I send you all my love, my gratitude, and I can't wait for our next play date.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.